Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Kathy Lamb. Kathy Lamb lived in an affluent area of Palm Beach. Kathy had a challenging childhood. Her parents divorced when she was young, and she lived with her father. During her teenage years, her mother was absent, which took a significant emotional toll on her. She was self-conscious about her weight, feeling larger than her peers. Fortunately, her stepmother was kind and supportive. Recognizing Kathy's insecurities, she helped her build her confidence, and over time, Kathy became more confident. She started playing sports and trying to lose weight. Kathy was very smart and kind, which helped her make friends in high school. She was active and cheerful, and her problems seemed to disappear when she was with her friends. One of those friends was Jeff. They met when he was 17 and she was 16, and they quickly felt a special connection. Their relationship continued even after they graduated. 2 years later, they secretly married, surprising their families. When their parents found out, they thought the couple was too young to make such a serious decision, but the couple was determined to stay together, despite family pressure. It seemed like the newlyweds had a bright future ahead of them. Jeff worked hard at a local repossessed car park, while Kathy found work as a pharmacist at a pharmacy. She had the necessary education and wanted to advance in the field. Over the years, Jeff remained a tow truck driver, while Kathy became a top pharmacist. A year later, she was offered a job as a district planner for distributing drugs to pharmacies, an opportunity she eagerly accepted. They achieved their dream of owning a home and enjoyed 12 happy years there until a devastating tragedy occurred. On June 15, 2004, Jeff returned home from work at around 7 p.m. He intended to invite his wife to dinner. However, as soon as he entered, he was horrified to see blood all over the hallway, running down the walls. The gruesome evidence of blood splatter and brain matter terrified him. As he called 911, he struggled to speak and held back tears. Initially, the operator mistook his cries for those of a woman, but Jeff eventually plucked up the courage to describe his home, which now looked like the set of a horror movie. At the end of the corridor, there was a significant amount of blood on one wall, as if it had been splattered. Facing this wall, about 1.5 meters away, similar splatters were visible on the opposite wall, and they extended down the stairs leading to the second floor. On the upper level, in the midst of the gruesome scene, lay 30-year-old Kathy, who was unresponsive. The operator attempted to guide Jeff over the phone to provide first aid, but Kathy's injuries were so severe that there was nothing that could be done. When the police arrived, they were taken aback by the horrific sight. It was one of the most brutal crime scenes they had ever encountered. Kathy's body showed multiple severe head injuries from heavy objects. Her skull and face were so badly damaged that they appeared completely disfigured. Although the murder weapon was not found at the scene, a thorough laboratory analysis determined that it was likely a long, heavy object with a hexagonal shape or similar features. Jeff mentioned that he had tried to call his wife several times after 5 p.m. but received no answer, which he found unusual. Concerned, he rushed home to meet her. It turned out that not only Kathy was injured, the couple had 3 large dogs in the house, Jeff's dog and his wife's 2 dogs. Tragically, both of his wife's pets were discovered badly beaten and lying on the floor next to their deceased owner. They had suffered severe head injuries and were barely alive. Unfortunately, the injuries were so extensive that the veterinarians had to euthanize the dogs to relieve their suffering. In a shocking turn of events, Jeff's dog was found locked in his owner's bedroom. Paws from all 3 dogs were found at the scene, along with blood that police believe did not come from the animals. They suspect the blood may have come from a struggle with the killer. The blood has been sent for analysis to determine its source and whether it can help the investigation, and they await the results. Police are uncertain whether the blood on the dogs came from Kathy or whether they fought with the attacker to protect her, resulting in their fatal injuries. Police found the dogs unharmed after the woman had been killed and the fight had begun. The amount of blood on the animals suggests that they had seriously injured the attacker, possibly lacerating an arm or leg. This means that the attacker would have bled profusely, possibly from an open wound, and that he would have sought medical attention at a hospital. The attacker's intentions remain unclear. He may have acted recklessly or out of a deep hatred for his victim, ignoring the large dogs that lived with the family. After examining the crime scene, the police still lacked any concrete leads. They had to wait for the autopsy results to gather more information. In the meantime, they checked all the local hospitals for the injured attacker. Several suspicious people came in with injuries that were found to be unrelated to the incident, as their injuries did not match those of a dog bite. The police began talking to local residents in the hope that someone had seen suspicious activity at Kathy's home or had noticed the criminal fleeing, possibly injured. Unfortunately, no one observed anything unusual. They were also trying to find a motive. Robbery seemed unlikely given the many valuables in the family's home. Only the gold earrings with diamonds that the Kathy was wearing during the attack were missing, while everything else remained untouched. Even the money, which was clearly visible, was not taken. It seems unlikely that a robber would ignore such an opportunity. There were no indications of a break-in, the furniture was undisturbed, drawers were not opened, and belongings were not scattered about, as thieves typically do when they search for valuables. This led the police to explore alternative motives and various theories. The forensic expert determined that the murder occurred between 4:30 p.m. and 5 p.m. Jeff, the first suspect who found the scene, had a strong alibi. At that time, he was on the job and was seen by numerous co-workers. Additionally, he showed no signs of injuries that would typically result from a struggle with the dogs. Just as police were about to clear Jeff of suspicion, an unknown young woman arrived at the family home. Joy Steele came to the house and introduced herself as Jeff's fiancée, which surprised the police, especially since Jeff had been crying earlier. The police found this an interesting case, as a man who had just lost his wife was being comforted by his mistress, with whom he had been in a serious relationship for a long time. This revelation made the case seem even more suspicious. 7 years into their relationship, Kathy discovered Jeff's infidelity. Despite this, they remained together and did not divorce. Kathy forgave him and even encouraged him to end the affair, leading to their reconciliation and continued life together just before the tragic incident. Police are considering whether a love triangle may have been a motive for the crime. Jeff had a strong motive for killing his troubled wife. That doesn't necessarily mean Jeff killed Kathy himself. He may have convinced someone else to do it. The police discovered a third dog locked in one of the rooms, which was unharmed. This was peculiar, especially given the serious injuries of the other 2 dogs belonging to the Kathy. Did the criminal truly hate her to the extent that he chose to ruin everything she cherished? The police needed to find answers to these questions. In the meantime, one of the police was questioning Jeff's mistress, Joy Steele, at the location of the incident. Joy shared her and Jeff's future plans. They planned to move away after a while Jeff planned to quit his job. Joy had a solid alibi. Joy, who was apparently working at a restaurant during the time of the murder, was present, and multiple people could confirm this. In addition, Joy had no injuries on her body. Although the suspicious couple could not have been directly involved in the murder due to their alibis and their lack of injuries, the police have not ruled them out as suspects given the serious circumstances surrounding the crime. They had a strong motive for their plan. The investigation into the crime and the hiring of the killer continues, with the police focusing on identifying potential enemies or those who may have wanted to harm Kathy. However, Kathy's friends and relatives have been unable to identify any enemies, with the exception of her husband. That same day, another suspect emerged. Jeff had another mistress named Lisa. A few weeks before the murder, Lisa's husband, Ray, discovered them together when he came home early from work and found Jeff shirtless on the couch. This confrontation led Ray to kick Jeff out of the house. The next day, Ray calls Lisa and threatens to kill Jeff if he continues with Lisa. Ray emerged as a potential suspect due to his violent nature and apparent motive. However, the situation raised questions about the Kathy. Why did Ray kill Jeff's wife? She had not harmed him and was actually the victim in the scenario, just like Ray. Despite this, Jeff continued to blame Ray. He believed that Ray had gone to the house to carry out his threat against Jeff, but Jeff was not home at the time. It is also possible that upon arriving at Jeff's house, Ray was in danger from Jeff's wife and dogs, so Ray felt compelled to kill her and the dogs. However, this motive does not fit with the extreme violence the killers showed towards Kathy. Her injuries were extremely brutal, suggesting that this was not a random crime, but an act of deep hatred. The police then turned their attention to Lisa, the second lover. Despite her husband's threats, she remained in contact with Jeff. Cell phone records confirmed that they frequently called and texted each other, including at the time of the Kathy's murder. Lisa and her husband Ray were both investigated, but they had solid alibis and were eliminated as suspects. However, the police decided to track the geolocation data of the lovers' mobile devices to gain more details. The call between Lisa and Jeff took place just minutes after the murder. Jeff's cell phone was found near his home, and Jeff was not at work at the time, contrary to what he had previously said. Additionally, Jeff's dog was unharmed, which seems more than just a coincidence. Forensic experts conducted a thorough examination of the animals. They collected DNA samples from the dog's muzzle and paws. Notably, the stains found on Jeff's dog were identified as palm prints. Blood samples taken from the scene were confirmed to belong to the Kathy, indicating that the perpetrator was in the hall with the dog after the attack on Kathy, during which she was injured or possibly killed. Police suspected that the killer's DNA might be on the animal's muzzles and paws. However, the investigation disproved this theory, revealing that the blood was not human, but believed to be from dogs that may have been fighting each other. By analyzing all the new information, police were able to piece together a clearer picture of the events that occurred on that tragic day. Someone entered the house and discovered Kathy along with her 3 large dogs. The attacker hit the woman in the head with a heavy object. 2 dogs were present, also seriously injured and later died. And they did not attack the attacker. They endured the blows without defending themselves. The 3rd dog also did not confront the attacker. Instead, the 3rd dog focused on protecting the other 2 dogs. This behavior aroused suspicion. The police consulted dog handlers for insights. Experts suggested that the dog's lack of resistance indicated they were familiar with the attacker and viewed him as a friend. This familiarity explained why they did not confront him but instead appeared to bite each other. Police found bite marks on the dogs, leading them to conclude that only Jeff, the owner of the surviving dog, could have attacked Kathy. Additionally, geolocation data indicated that the Jeff was near the house, which supported their suspicions. However, the Supreme Court only had circumstantial evidence, meaning they still had a long way to go before bringing any charges. The police needed one crucial piece of information to strengthen their case. With no further clues, the police focused on investigating Jeff's personal life to understand what might have motivated Jeff to kill his wife. It turned out that the family had recently faced significant financial difficulties, which had affected Jeff for many years before these events. Jeff's boss caught him stealing a large sum of money, about $30,000. Jeff had not spent it all and agreed to return it. He also paid his boss $20,000 in restitution. The police then analyzed Jeff's activities. It turned out that his job brought in only a small income, just enough for his family's needs. He also spent money on his mistress. His wife's income was much higher, but he did not want to tell her about his problems. Jeff was characterized as someone without any remarkable business skills. He was neither particularly foolish nor exceptionally intelligent. His earnings were limited, making the compensation amount a serious financial burden for him. Despite living in an affluent neighborhood, he struggled to come up with the funds. Jeff sought ways to earn extra money or secure a loan, but all these efforts proved fruitless, and the total amount of compensation remained far beyond his reach. He later learned that he was the sole beneficiary of Kathy's life insurance policy, which was worth $29,000. Police believed that this amount of money could solve all of Jeff's financial problems. On the day of the incident, police collected the clothes he was wearing at the time. However, forensic experts conducted a quick test and found no blood or DNA from Kathy on his clothes. The suspect was wearing dark clothing, making it difficult to detect any blood stains. The experts meticulously studied every millimeter of the items using a microscope with 60,000 times magnification. Inside the jeans, they discovered several small red drops, which the forensic team identified as blood. This blood had seeped deep into the fabric fibers, suggesting that it was from high-velocity splashes. This evidence was consistent with the nature of the injuries sustained by the Kathy. DNA testing confirmed that the blood belonged to Kathy. The police were further surprised when they examined the Jeff's other belongings. They found a gold earring embedded with a diamond in one of his trouser pockets, which he had claimed was stolen during an attack. This indicated that he likely staged the scene and hesitated to dispose of the item to avoid being caught at a pawn shop. To strengthen their case in court, the police needed to find the murder weapon. Despite their best efforts, the police were unable to find the weapon. It took the prosecutor's office 2 months to establish a clear connection between the killer and the victim. During this time, an employee of the company where Jeff worked discovered a hexagonal crowbar on the roof of the building. The tool was standard equipment on the company's tow trucks and was available to all employees. What made the crowbar suspicious was the significant amount of blood found on it. The employee promptly notified the police of the discovery. Jeff claimed that he had lost his crowbar and was unable to provide it to the police. This raised suspicions that the bloody crowbar belonged to him and may have been hidden as the murder weapon. The crowbar was sent to a laboratory, where experts compared it to the injuries found on Kathy's head. They concluded that the shape of the tool matched the impact marks. Additionally, the blood found on the crowbar was confirmed to be Kathy's through analysis. Jeff was arrested and charged with premeditated murder. Friends knew he had often complained about his troubled marriage. He claimed that Kathy couldn't manage household chores, which made him angry. However, he overlooked that she was the one supporting the family financially and covering their travel expenses, leaving her little time for housework. Jeff's car was always cluttered with garbage, yet he continued to blame Kathy. He frequently talked to friends about wanting to end their relationship, and several acquaintances reported that he was considering divorce. Kathy was unhappy in her marriage to Jeff due to his betrayals and chaotic lifestyle, which she knew about. She often vented her frustrations to friends but couldn't bring herself to leave him because she loved him deeply. Despite her unhappiness, she stayed with Jeff, trying to tolerate his behavior. For Jeff, murder seemed like a better option than going through a divorce. He was in dire financial straits after stealing $30,000 at work, which had severely impacted his finances. If he divorced Kathy, they would have to divide their assets, and he risked losing their home. He felt he had nothing left to lose, as a divorce would leave him with little since Kathy could claim most of their assets. Jeff figured that by committing murder, he could use the life insurance payout to pay off his debts, keeping part of the money to start a new life with his mistress. Jeff had promised to make a choice between his two girlfriends, Lisa and Joy, but the decision remained a secret. During the investigation, police uncovered more details about the crime. On the day it happened, Jeff left for work but had actually planned to kill his wife. He drove a tow truck to a gas station, pretending he needed to fill it up. His absence from work was noted, and during that time, he returned home to wait for his wife to return. He was familiar with her daily routine, so he did not have to wait long. In a shocking turn of events, Jeff brutally killed his wife's dogs with a crowbar. The dogs, confused and frightened, began to fight. To stop the chaos, Jeff hit each dog on the head and then took his pet, Netarunu, into a room and locked the door. After the incident, he removed his wife's diamond earrings, intending to make it look like a robbery. He discarded some of his clothes, taking off his shirt and shoes, but he kept the jeans he wore during the massacre, likely overlooking the bloodstains on them. This oversight allowed forensic experts to find tiny drops of blood on the jeans, linking him to the crime. His lover called him while he was near his home, which revealed his location on the phone. When he arrived at the station, he attempted to dispose of the crowbar used in the attack, but did so carelessly, simply throwing it onto the roof of a utility building and not washing it. He believed the tool would never be discovered. Jeff was convicted of premeditated murder due to financial difficulties he thought he could overcome by collecting life insurance from his wife's death. Prosecutors presented substantial evidence linking him to the crime scene, the murder weapon, and the victim. His fingerprints were found on the crowbar, along with Kathy's blood on his clothing. He had attempted to stage a robbery and failed to completely conceal the earrings that were believed to have been stolen. Several people testified about domestic problems. Kathy still hoped to reconcile with her husband, despite being devastated by his betrayal. She truly loved him and was undaunted by his financial difficulties. What she craved most was love and understanding. Unfortunately, Jeff did not want to rekindle their relationship. Instead, he planned a murder that he believed would net him $29,000. It is suspected that Joy, one of Jeff's lovers, knew of his intentions. Jeff promised her a future together, on the condition that she pay off the debt he would incur from his crimes. During the hearing, the defense attempted to portray Jeff as a model husband and a good person, but no witness could reliably substantiate this claim. Jeff had never been a hard worker and showed little interest in his work. He had no motivation to do anything else and did not have a positive reputation in his family life. He was not a good husband, as he had a history of infidelity that his late wife knew about. His lifestyle was well known to friends and family. But it was his wife who suffered the most. When Jeff's efforts to build a better image failed, his attorney changed tactics. He began looking for weaknesses in the prosecution's case. However, the prosecution's strategy was well rehearsed and backed by substantial evidence, leaving little room for debate. The defense argued that Jeff was not the only possible suspect in Kathy's murder, claiming that the police had focused too quickly on him without fully exploring other potential suspects. In fact, police and the prosecutor's office had interviewed dozens of people and considered multiple suspects. Each suspect was thoroughly questioned, allowing police to eliminate those who did not fit the evidence. The prosecution argued that the attacker had two motives. First, he hoped to solve his financial problems through a life insurance policy. Second, he wanted to get rid of his troubled wife so he could live with one of his mistresses. Additionally, he sought to avoid the risk of losing his assets or having to divide his assets in a divorce. The prosecution also argued that Jeff's mistress, Lisa, knew about his plans. She supported him and was waiting for the call to hear about the progress of the crime. Her indiscretion led her to call Jeff, which provided the police with a vital clue. Investigations were conducted to determine whether the mistresses were involved in planning or organizing the crime, but the results were negative. However, it is clear that they supported Jeff, even though they should have reported his bad intentions to the police to prevent the murder. Ultimately, no evidence was found to prove the lovers' guilt or involvement, so they faced no consequences in court. In September 2006, Jeff Lamb was convicted of premeditated murder and sentenced to life without parole. As the verdict was read, Lisa wept uncontrollably in court. Kathy's family believes the court's ruling was fair. In Kathy's mother's opinion, Jeff should rot behind bars for the rest of his life. The case of Julia Niswinder. Julia Niswinder was born in 1989 in the small town of Monroe, which has a population of 20,000. She has a twin sister named Jennifer. The girls were raised by their grandparents while their mother was building her personal life. Kim had given birth to them at 15, claiming she was raped at 14 by a guy she barely knew. However, relatives say he was someone familiar and close to the family. Regardless, he avoided taking responsibility. After discovering her pregnancy, Kim decided she wasn't ready to be a mother and entrusted her daughters to her parents. The grandparents became their official guardians and raised them as their own children. When the children grew up, their mother remarried Jim, who worked in the cleaning business, and they had another daughter. By then, Jennifer was already attending school and living with her mother. While Julia spent a lot of time with her grandparents on her mother's side. In high school, things changed. According to her mother, Julia became defiant and uncontrollable, often arguing with her twin sister, Jennifer. Eventually, their mother grew tired of the constant fights between the daughters. Their house was small, with only 2 bedrooms and a living room, so she couldn't give the older daughters separate rooms. As a result, she decided to send Julia to live with her grandparents again. Julia was happy to return to grandparents. She lived there for a while, and her grandparents indulged her and were very affectionate toward her. At that time, Julia became very concerned about her appearance and tried to lose weight. She followed strict diets, restricted herself in almost everything, and ate very little. Her grandma was worried about her, but Julia assured her that she was fine. At 19 years old, Julia needed to make her own life decisions. She enrolled at Eastern Michigan University in the journalism faculty and continued living with her grandmother. Julia dreamed of becoming a TV presenter. She became close to Jennifer and her mother, but did not want to return home. The 2 sisters became closer, sharing secrets, experiences, and events in their lives. Julia later moved to a room on the campus of a university in the small town of Salanta, Michigan. She was fortunate to get a room with a bathroom. Julia also got a job with her mother at Ulmert. Her new place was a 45-minute drive from her mother's house. Her neighbors were girls she got along with well. On Thursday, December 6, 2012, with Christmas and the holidays approaching, Julia's neighbors left for the weekend to visit their families. Julia visited her mother's family. They had already set up a Christmas tree and began decorating it and the house together. They all enjoyed hot chocolate and listened to Christmas songs, creating a festive atmosphere and having a wonderful time together. On Friday, December 7th, she visited her mother's workplace and they went shopping for presents together. Julia and her mother then went home together, and an argument broke out that turned into a fight. The exact details of the incident remain unclear. Julia left the house in distress, drove to her grandmother's house, and expressed that she never wanted to return to that house again. Her grandmother comforted her, invited her to stay, and together they decorated the Christmas tree and the house. Julia's mother later visited her grandparents and reassured Julia that she had misunderstood the situation. Julia's grandmother listened to both sides and sensed that something was wrong. When her mother left, Julia stayed with her grandmother. The next day, December 8th, Julia went to work. She saw her mother there but did not speak to her. As they passed each other, Julia's mother told her that she loved her. After her shift, Julia went home. During her lunch break, she met her sister Jennifer at a coffee shop and mentioned her plans for the evening, saying that she was going to meet a guy after work. But she kept the details a secret. Julia was very private about her personal life, so it was not surprising that Julia kept the information secret with Jennifer. After meeting with Jennifer, she rushed to the car without putting on her coat, despite the cold weather. The last time Jennifer spoke to Julia was around 11 p.m. when Julia returned home from her date. Their conversation was brief. Julia simply said, "I'm home," before hanging up. Julia was very tired and she needed to study for an exam the next day, December 9th. After working at Walmart, she went shopping and then returned home. That night, she ran into a neighbor returned from visiting her family. The neighbor was getting ready to sleep at her boyfriend's house. Julia closed the bedroom door and was about to go to sleep. While the neighbor was getting ready, she heard the TV playing loudly in Julia's room. This made her feel strange because she had never seen Julia watching TV before, especially when it was time to go to bed. However, the neighbor was in a hurry to meet her boyfriend, so she didn't investigate further and left the house. On Monday morning, December 10th, 2012, a neighbor returned from a family visit. She quickly showered to go to school. While getting ready, she noticed that Julia's alarm clock kept ringing, but no one seemed to have turned it off. Knowing that Julia often struggled to wake up in the morning, the neighbor was not surprised. She knocked on Julia's door to try to wake her up, but received no response. After a while, she decided not to bother her anymore and went to school. That day, Julia did not go to class and also missed an important exam, which was unusual for her, as she had never been absent or late for an exam before. Julia missed her shift at her stepfather's cleaning company, where she had taken a part-time job to earn money before the holidays. Although she was scheduled to work, she did not show up. She also missed her shift at Walmart that evening, which raised concerns among her coworkers. The next day, December 11th, Julia missed her shift for the second time. Her coworkers grew increasingly concerned and tried to reach her by phone, but no one answered. An employee had Julia's mother's phone number and called her that evening to inform her that Julia had missed 2 shifts. Julia's mother, Kim, was at a cafe playing darts with Jennifer and other relatives at the time. She noted that their schedules often didn't align, and it was common for them to go 2 or 3 days without seeing or calling each other. When Kim learned that Julia was missing and not responding to calls, she panicked and tried to reach her daughter repeatedly, but all her calls went to voicemail. Concerned, Kim called Julia's friend Rachel and asked her to check on Julia. Rachel agreed and went to Julia's house around 9 p.m. Rachel found Julia's car parked in the driveway next to the house, but no one answered the door or the phone. Concerned, Rachel sought out a security guard for assistance. She asked the guard to open Julia's room to check, but he refused and instead called the police. The guard could not find a spare key to Julia's room. When the police arrived, they broke down the door and entered the apartment. Inside the bedroom, everything was in disarray, furniture was scattered on the floor. And Julia's handbag was on the bed, making it look like a robbery had taken place. As the police continued their search of the apartment, they made a dreadful discovery. They found the body of the Julia face down in the bathtub. Her body was fully submerged, and her hands were behind her back with her feet together. There were signs of restraint on her wrists and ankles. A phone was also found underwater beneath her body. Julia's torn clothes were on the bathroom floor, and it was evident that the fabric had been cut with a knife. After examining her, the police concluded that her body had likely been in the water for 2 days and was in a state of advanced decomposition. The knife and rope used to tie up Julia were not found anywhere in the apartment. All of Julia's valuables, including her wallet with cash, laptop, and car keys, were still on the table, and the wrapped Christmas presents were untouched. The only items missing were the pillowcase and the keys to Julia's room, which led investigators to rule out the possibility of a robbery. Rachel learned the tragic news from the police and immediately informed Julia's mother about her daughter's death. Kim and Jennifer quickly got into their car and drove to Julia's apartment. Despite the police cordon, the mother and sister approached the building to find out what had happened. They tried to enter the room but were stopped by the police. The family demanded answers about Julia, but no one would give them any information. They were distraught and pressed the police for information, but the police only confirmed that Julia was dead. Police took Julia's family to the station along with her neighbors for questioning. Julia's neighbors said they generally got along with her, although they had had a conflict in the past. They had resolved their differences and had not had any problems since. The neighbors said they were not home when the murder occurred and provided a confirmed alibi, clearing them of any suspicion. Forensic experts examined the crime scene and found no signs of forced entry. All windows and doors were locked. Julia's room was on the first floor, leading police to speculate that she may have opened the door herself and that the attacker was likely someone she knew. At the crime scene, police discovered bloody rubber gloves, male biological fluids, and 3 DNA samples on the gloves. The evidence was analyzed, revealing that one DNA sample belongs to Julia, while the other 2 came from an unidentified male. One of the samples was too decomposed to be identifiable, and there was no record of the second male DNA sample in the police database. Notably, the biological fluids belonged to a man who had had a vasectomy, suggesting that he was not a father. This led police to conclude that the suspect was likely an older man, rather than a younger one, as vasectomies are not typically performed at a young age. As a result, police focused their search on adult men who knew Julia. An autopsy revealed that Julia died from strangulation. She had been strangled before being thrown into the water. The potential suspect had turned up the volume on the television on the day of the crime to drown out any screams she may have made during the struggle. A toxicology report confirmed that there were no traces of alcohol or illegal drugs in her system. While the police continued their investigation, Julia's family decided to conduct their own investigation to find out the truth. They posted leaflets and appealed to the public for help through the media and social networks. But these efforts did not help their investigation. Police discovered that the girl had been dating a young man shortly before the murder. Police checked Julia's phone and identified the man, taking him in for questioning. However, he was soon released, as he had a solid alibi that cleared him of suspicion. Police found Julia's stepfather, Jim, suspicious, as he appeared unusually calm and did not seem to be grieving over Julia's death. He was familiar with her house and could have easily gained access to the apartment, as Julia may have let him in herself. People who knew him described him as strange, reclusive, and unsociable. Everyone kept their distance from Jim, especially after the Jim had a vasectomy following the birth of his daughter with Kim. This made him the primary suspect in the investigation. When Julia's mother, Kim, and her sister Jennifer found out about the suspicions surrounding Jim, they strongly defended him, believing he was innocent. Kim argued that she had trouble sleeping at night and frequently got up to use the bathroom due to health issues. She insisted that she would have noticed if Jim had left the bed that night, but he stayed with her the entire time. Kim rejected all allegations against Jim, explaining that she had previously been a victim of violence. She stated that if she had sensed any danger from Jim, she would never have allowed him near her daughters. Julia's grandparents were very concerned about her and decided to speak up. They informed the police about a fight that occurred at Julia's parents' house a few days before the tragedy. Although Julia didn't provide details about the conflict, she did say she would never return to that house. This raised questions about whether she had discovered something troubling or if there was another reason that led Jim to want to eliminate her. The grandparents noted that Kim and Jim's marriage was on the brink of divorce, as they frequently argued, and Kim had expressed that Jim might leave her. They hadn't shared a bedroom for a long time, making it difficult for Kim to know if Jim was home that night. This could explain Kim's intense protectiveness of her husband. She might have been trying to save their marriage or covering for him. In the early days after the incident, the police prevented Julia's mother and stepfather from entering her room where the crime took place, as they were collecting evidence and information. Despite this, Kim and Jim attempted to gain access to the room and were eventually successful, although Kim later said she did not remember how they got in. The police were surprised because they had not been granted permission to enter the room. Once inside, her parents immediately began unpacking and cleaning the room. First, they dumped a large bag of trash in the bathroom. After the cleanup, much of the original crime scene became untraceable. Additionally, Julia's car, which she had saved up to buy and was still paying for, was quickly sold by her parents, on the grounds that they could no longer afford the loan. This raised significant suspicions. The FBI eventually got involved. Forensic experts concluded that Jim was the prime suspect. Julia's maternal grandfather, James, noticed that Jim had a very strict parenting style, often making her cry and cornering her. James suspected that Jim might be punishing his daughter harshly behind closed doors. It was also revealed that Jim had been a karate instructor and the children had reported their mother for his brutal treatment. Jim had trained his daughter rigorously, helping her achieve a black belt in karate. The police asked Jim to provide a DNA sample, which he readily provided to clear his name. However, his DNA did not match that of the second man found on the glove. As time passed, the investigation stalled, and the case seemed to have been forgotten by everyone except the grandparents. They regularly asked the police for any updates and expressed their frustration at the lack of progress. Julia's grandparents still believed that the police should thoroughly investigate Jim, her stepfather. James suspected that Jim may have taken latex gloves from a cleaner at work to frame someone else while concealing his own involvement. However, this theory was never pursued further. It left many unanswered questions, such as whose DNA was on the damaged glove. It raised the possibility that there could have been two criminals involved. They asked Jim to take a lie detector test, which he passed twice, but Julia's grandfather remained skeptical. He still believed that Jim was somehow involved in Julia's murder. James' persistent attempts to communicate with the police about the investigation led them to stop contacting him. This decision upset only Julia's mother. Living in Florida, James was unable to visit the police in person, which resulted in him losing access to important information and feeling powerless. His daughter Kim and granddaughters, Jennifer and Madison, wrote to James to say he was no longer part of their family, which hurt him deeply. One of Julia's friends informed the police that Julia had reported harassment from her stepfather, who referred to Julia as his girlfriend, causing her fear. This suggested a possible sexual motive for the murder, prompting the police to seek a search warrant for Jim's home. During the search of his laptop, they discovered numerous explicit photos of minors. Jim was arrested due to these photos. At first, he claimed he was innocent, insisting that he did not know where the photos came from and that he was being framed. Later, he conceded that the photos might belong to him but insisted he was unaware that the subjects were minors. He maintained his innocence and was found not guilty because the prosecution failed to prove that the photos showed minors. Later, Julia's friend withdrew her accusations against her stepfather, although police informed her that her previous statements had been recorded. James discovered that Kim and Jennifer spoke to this friend and likely pressured her to change her testimony. Despite everything, Kim continues to support her husband and believes in his innocence. She thinks that her neighbor is responsible for her daughter's death due to a disagreement. However, this theory is not taken seriously because the neighbor has an alibi, and only male DNA was found at the crime scene. 3 years after Julia's murder, in 2015, Kim and Jim's attorney advised them not to give a written statement because it could be used against them in court. James was even more angry when he heard this. He felt that if they had nothing to hide, they would not have hired an attorney or refused to give a written statement, because giving false testimony could have legal consequences. By insisting on giving a statement, they avoided potential liability. It was later discovered that the police had overlooked a crucial piece of evidence. It was the bathtub rug that might contain the criminal's DNA. This information emerged when new police took over the case. They reviewed all the documents and paid special attention to this rug. However, the police could not find it. Julia's mother allowed them to search among Julia's belongings, which she had taken from Julia's room and stored in a storage room, but the rug was not among them. Its disappearance is a mystery. Only Julia's family had access to the storage facility. Julia's grandfather suspected that her mother and stepfather had thrown the rug away while cleaning the bathroom, along with the trash. The stepfather's mother and Julia's twin sister both insist that there was no argument in their home a few days before Julia's murder. They described the gathering as warm and friendly, with no disagreements. The James is determined to seek justice for Julia. He has thoroughly researched DNA and discovered that technology has made significant advancements in the past decade, allowing for the analysis of damaged or weak DNA samples. He is puzzled by the police's disregard for his requests and suggestions, as they appear reluctant to pursue the case. Julia's mother, Kim, has divorced Jim, but they remain on good terms and maintain communication. She continues to support Jim's innocence and views him as the decent person. As a result, there have been no arrests in the case, and the perpetrator remains unpunished. The case of Brian King and Christina Benjamin. On July 29, 1993, it was a hot day in Alice County, Texas, USA. Despite the heat, a road crew was working on Cato Road to prepare the ground for asphalt. During their break, one worker leveling gravel spotted something unusual in the thick bushes across the Smith Creek River. The object, about 100 meters away, had a grayish color that made it stand out from the surrounding greenery. Curiosity prompted the worker and a colleague to climb over a barbed wire fence to investigate the mysterious object. As they got closer, about 10 meters from the object, a foul stench hit their noses. The stench became unbearable, and they covered their noses with their clothes. As they got closer, they discovered that the object was a corpse. It appeared to be a she, probably of school age. The gruesome sight showed torn flesh covered in flies, but the most shocking aspect was that the girl's head and arms were missing. The workers quickly notified their supervisor and decided to call the police. Without cell phones and far from the nearest town, they decided to leave one worker with the body while the other went to a small neighboring town to seek help. The police arrived shortly after being notified and began examining the scene for evidence and any dismembered body parts. However, a more gruesome discovery awaited them just 300 meters away. They discovered the body of a young girl and also found the body of a young man, who appeared to be about 15 years old. He was lying face down on the riverbank, about 10 meters from the bridge. Unlike the girl, he was still dressed and had not been dismembered. It appeared that he had been thrown into the river, and the current had washed him to shore. Retrieving the young man's body was much more difficult than accessing the girl's remains, so the police called the city fire department for assistance. With the help of special equipment, they were able to reach his body. Meanwhile, a team of forensic experts remained at the scene to investigate and collect evidence before it got too dark. Police worked the scene until the sun went down. They focused on the area where the bodies were found, and the medical examiner analyzed the victims. The expert determined that the first body, the girl, was that of a teenage girl who had been stabbed multiple times. She had been shot twice in the back with a .22 caliber gun, and her head had been severed from her body. It was likely with a large hunting knife or possibly an axe. The body showed numerous severe wounds on the abdomen, thighs, and genitals, with some resembling intricate hieroglyphs carved into the skin. There was a long, deep cut on the stomach, similar to those made during an autopsy. The criminal expert noted signs of extreme cruelty inside the cavity, including torn intestines and severed hands. Bruises that looked like marks from handcuffs suggested the victims had been restrained for a period before the torture started. Additionally, both of the girls' breasts had been removed. Experts believe the victims' bodies had been dead for 2 days, judging by their level of decomposition. He had been shot twice in the head with a similar weapon. There were no signs of a beating or struggle on his body. Police believe the attacker may have severed the girl's arms and head to make identification more difficult. However, he may not have realized that advanced DNA identification methods were available. However, the condition of the bodies and their decomposition could make this identification quite difficult. Forensic scientists found that the girl had been sexually assaulted. The high temperatures had caused significant decomposition, making it difficult to determine the exact details of the crime. Police believe the attack was carried out in anger or extreme hatred. However, the presence of fly larvae allowed researchers to determine a more precise time of death for both teams. The victims were tortured on the night of July 26th to 27th. To support their findings, the forensic expert consulted a forensic entomologist who studies the growth of insects on decomposing bodies and the damage they cause. Ultimately, the lab staff agreed that the time of death had been accurately determined. However, some errors regarding the timeline of the investigation had to be cleared up. Since the boy's hands and head were intact, forensic experts were puzzled as to how he escaped the same fate as the girl. They questioned why his hands were not cut off, as this would have made it easier for the criminal to conceal the victim's identity. The killer likely thought that the boy's body would be lost in the current or would drown, making it difficult to find. This might explain why he didn't dismember the body, or perhaps the body fell into the water by accident. The police believed that the dismemberment was not meant to mislead the investigation, but might have been motivated by something more disturbing. Many serial killers keep trophies from their crimes. It's possible that the girl's head became part of such a gruesome collection because the attack resembled that of a maniac. The police's first goal was to find the girl's clothes. During their search, they found a clump of light-colored hair caught in the barbed wire that the workers had crossed. Police believed that this hair might have come from the decapitated victim. Unfortunately, the mutilated body had no identifying marks. However, in the boy's pocket, they found a book subscription card from a town registered to Brian King. They were able to confirm the details at the library, but it was closed for the night, so they would have to wait until morning. The next morning, the police station received a report about the disappearance of 2 teenagers from a small town, the same one where the library was located. The boy's name was Brian King, and the girl's name was Christina Benjamin. After receiving the report, police visited the boy's home and showed the wallet they had found to the father who answered the door. He confirmed that it belonged to his 14-year-old son, Brian, who was missing along with his 13-year-old stepdaughter, Christina, who had blonde hair. Days before the incident, around midnight, the children's father was awakened by a suspicious car that honked its horn and drove off. During this time, Brian was sleeping in a tent outside the house, which was unusual for a teenager. The car returned just 10 to 15 minutes later. The father noticed his son talking calmly with the driver and assumed it was one of Brian's friends. He spotted a man with blonde hair in the back seat but couldn't see the driver. Feeling reassured, he went to the bathroom. When he came back, the car and his son were gone. The father thought Brian had gone out with friends and planned to discuss this odd situation with him in the morning, so he went to bed. However, Brian never returned home, and it was later discovered that Christina had also disappeared. The parents started contacting friends and acquaintances of their children, but no one had seen the teenagers. The family had a younger girl who shared a room with Christina. She reported that on the night they disappeared, Brian entered their room and woke up Christina. He mentioned that some cool guys had arrived in a car and invited them to a party. Christina agreed, and they both left home together. Eventually, their parents reported the children missing to the police. They noted that before their disappearance, Christina had injured her foot during a school class. Upon further investigation, it was found that Christina's hair was on the forensic expert's desk. She had light hair, which was compared to strands found on a fence and those collected from home combs. The results showed that the hairs did not match, indicating they could belong to a likely killer, who also appeared to have light hair. With no evidence available, forensic experts had to rely on alternative methods. They discovered fibers on Brian's shoes that matched the material used in the carpets of Japanese cars. Brian's father provided a description of the car he saw, mentioning that it was dark in color. However, his description lacked detail, as he could not recall the specific model or license plate number. Police were particularly puzzled by the brutality that Christina had suffered. If this was not a personal hate crime, it would suggest they were dealing with a very dangerous person who was likely to commit further acts of violence. They speculate that the motive behind such cruelty could have been sexual. After interviewing the friends of the murdered teenagers, the police learned that on the evening of her disappearance, Christina was supposed to meet a man named Jason. All the witnesses who spoke to the police pointed to Jason Massey as the only person capable of committing such a crime. One of his friends revealed that Jason had long ago turned to a darker lifestyle. He had dropped out of school, never held a job, frequently killed animals, and kept their heads as trophies. Jason did not hide his disturbing interests. He once made a chilling comment, expressing enjoyment in saying that if a serial killer were active in the area, it would be him. Although he liked to boast about such things, people generally did not take him seriously. Jason was described as having long, curly blonde hair and was 20 years old at the time of these events. His mother was indifferent towards him, even hiding food in his room. The family frequently moved, faced evictions due to unpaid rent, and often lived in unstable conditions. Jason had a difficult childhood, living in a car and facing a harsh environment. He was addicted to alcohol and drugs, bullied weaker children and started harming animals. His father was also addicted to drugs and treated him badly. During Jason's school years, his father was incarcerated for a long time, but it had a serious impact on his mental health. Jason was involved in various petty crimes, including stalking. There was an incident where he killed a girl's dog because she rejected his advances, and he continued to stalk her, leaving her extremely scared. As a child, Jason loved his younger brother but grew to hate adults. As an adult, his feelings for women became entwined with violent fantasies. He also believed in ghosts and thought he could hear them speaking to him, influenced by religious stories told to him by his devout grandmother. The year the two teenagers were murdered, he was sentenced to 12 months in prison after a police officer discovered a dead cat and some suspicious cutting tools in his car. Unfortunately, he was released early and never faced the consequences of his actions. Police reported that when Jason was arrested, he was wearing handcuffs and appeared to be enjoying the situation. Jason did not resist arrest and confidently stated that he would be released soon. After searching his home, police found numerous newspaper clippings about the murders, a collection of adult videos, a box filled with handcuffs, and knives that had traces of blood. His room also contained books on satanic themes. In the Jason's car, a brown 1982 Subaru, forensic experts discovered what appeared to be blood stains, particularly concentrated in the trunk. They also found duct tape with light hair that did not belong to the Jason, a receipt for ammunition, a hunting knife, and a brown carpet with fibers matching those found at the crime scene. During questioning, that Jason denied any involvement in the crimes. He assumed he knew where the severed body parts were and even offered to lead the police to them. They searched the forest for several hours together but found nothing. After returning to the station, Jason requested a lawyer and stopped cooperating with the police. Soon after, the police received an anonymous tip suggesting that Jason was the only one who could be responsible for the teenagers' massacre. Later, a witness emerged who had spent much of the evening of July 26th with Jason. She stated that he had left home acting strangely aggressive, likely due to drug use. She noticed he had handcuffs and a gun, which made her uneasy, but she didn't report it to the police because she was afraid of him. The girl later said that Jason owned a .22 caliber pistol, the same type used to shoot the Brian and Christina, and that he had purchased ammunition shortly before killing the two children. DNA evidence from blood and hair found in his car matched the victims. Police gathered more and more circumstantial evidence linking Jason to the massacre, while he had no alibi. That evening, his friends and acquaintances found him strange, and some even felt afraid of him. A teacher from the school Jason attended said he was fixated on disturbing images, including satanic symbols. He often spoke about murders, which frightened some of his classmates. At that point, there was no solid evidence against him. To establish Jason's connection, the FBI was called in to create a criminal profile using photographs from the crime scene. During the investigation, it was discovered that Jason's mother had discovered several of Jason's notebooks the previous June. These notebooks contained disturbing content, including a list of girls Jason wanted to kill, with detailed descriptions of the violent acts he fantasized about. Christina was at the top of the list. The alarming nature of the diary prompted Jason's mother to seek help from a psychotherapy clinic after reading them. A psychiatrist assessed Jason and concluded that he posed a danger to himself and society, leading to his admission for intensive care and further observation. However, not all medical professionals agreed with the diagnosis of antisocial disorder. Most doctors, after conducting evaluations, opposed this diagnosis, resulting in Jason's release from the clinic without further treatment. Jason's writings became crucial evidence in the case, as they showed his obsession with thoughts of murder and torture directed at young girls for several years. He claimed that his desire to kill was motivated purely by sexual arousal. On March 17, 1994, Jason was charged with 2 counts of premeditated murder, yet he maintained his innocence. 3 weeks after the charges were filed, the hearings commenced. The prosecutor's office intended to pursue the death penalty for the defendant, which is permitted under Texas law. The hearing started on September 28, 1994. The prosecution alleged that in mid-July 1993, Jason confided in a friend that he had obtained ammunition, knives, and handcuffs, and that he had devised a plan to kidnap Christina from her home. He used Brian to entice both teenagers into a car, claiming they were going to a party. Once inside, he quickly disposed of the boy and shot him in the car. Christina attempted to flee, but he injured her, caught her, and proceeded to torment her. The prosecution worried that Jason could evade justice since the public defender argued that the investigation was biased. The police focused only on Jason as a suspect after hearing about a mysterious individual, neglecting to consider other possibilities. The defense lawyer pointed out to the jury that the evidence and assumptions made by the prosecution needed further investigation. Jason's sister testified during the trial, sharing details about their challenging childhood. They often attended school unwashed, beaten, and hungry. As a result, Jason struggled to focus on his studies, despite his efforts. However, her testimony backfired when the prosecution pointed out that, despite their hardships, his sister managed to lead a decent life without committing violence. This was argued as a reason why Jason's background couldn't justify his cruel actions. The prosecution's team included a forensic expert and a forensic entomologist, who provided a thorough report on Christina's autopsy and the severe injuries she endured. Their findings indicated a brutal and unrestrained act of violence, suggesting that allowing Jason to leave the courtroom would be a grave injustice. One of the witnesses for the prosecution was Chris Nowlin, the same friend who was driving the car that transported the teenagers from their home. He chose to cooperate with the prosecution by testifying against Jason in exchange for immunity from criminal charges related to his involvement. Jason convinces his friend Chris to meet his girlfriend. Jason lies that he has been dating Christina since high school. When they reach a secluded area near a bridge, where Jason reveals his dark intentions to Chris. He plans to take Christina and Brian into the woods, kill them, and attack the girl. Chris dismisses Jason's words, as he often jokes about such things and never carries them out. Jason's former classmate testified that he had been stalking Christina for an extended period. After she rejected his advances in 7th grade, he killed her dog out of revenge and used its blood to stain her parents' car. The stalker also sent her disturbing photos of decapitated women, claiming this was how she would end up. A gun store salesman confirmed that he sold ammunition to Jason, which was later matched to the ammunition used in the murders. The day after the crime, Jason went to the wash to clean the car, but forensic experts discovered important evidence there. According to Jason's mother, he had joined a religious community shortly before the massacre, and she believed he was genuinely trying to change his ways. However, diary entries presented in court painted a different picture. They revealed that he was actually planning the crime. On the day of the hearing, a tourist was exploring the woods near where the teenagers were found murdered and stumbled upon an old, rusty refrigerator. Curious, he approached and opened the refrigerator, and was horrified to discover 30 animal skulls inside. He also found 4 red and yellow skulls in plastic bags. The skulls were accompanied by diaries written in a strange, messy handwriting, titled The Book of Murders. The diaries, which began in 1989 and ended on the day of the 1993 murders of Christina and Brian, detailed his grisly experiments with animals and outlined his plans for Christina, which he then carried out exactly as described. He had previously made attempts to commit murder but had failed, which frustrated him. His violent urges were partly driven by his hatred for his mother and a desire to kill her. Additionally, his grandmother often told him stories about demons, which may have shaped his thoughts. This evidence led the prosecutor's office to conclude that Christina's murder was premeditated. Jason described himself as a killing machine in his diaries. After both the prosecution and defense delivered their closing statements, the jury began deliberating the verdict. After 3 hours, they found Jason Massey guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The next step was to evaluate the aggravating and mitigating circumstances to determine whether the death penalty was appropriate. The prosecution presented evidence from Jason's own diary, which detailed his gruesome actions, including the murders of 4 cats, 7 dogs, and numerous calves. He had a disturbing obsession with collecting animal heads as trophies. Testimonies from a few of Jason's friends revealed that he viewed acts of cruelty as a display of power and wanted to showcase it. The diary entries also indicated that he had no intention of stopping his violent behavior. One of his last entries expressed a desire to become the most notorious serial killer in the United States, claiming that he planned to kill over the next 20 years. It took the jury just 15 minutes to decide on the death penalty for Jason Massey on October 12, 1994. After the verdict was announced, the judge stated that executing Jason was a more humane option than what he had done to his victims. When Jason was taken to death row, he claimed that he had placed Christina's hands and head in a pillowcase along with her clothes and thrown them into the river. However, police were skeptical of his account, as he often kept trophies from his crimes. Jason was shocked by the conviction. He was determined to fight the verdict, so his lawyer filed an appeal on his behalf. Many advocates, including a Canadian coalition against the death penalty, spoke out in his support. Human rights advocates argued that the death penalty was inhumane and criticized the investigation, claiming that it was poorly conducted and ignored other potential suspects who were in the car during the kidnapping of Christina and Brian. Despite their efforts, their actions were ultimately in vain. On the evening of April 3, 2001, Jason was led to the execution chamber. For his last meal, he chose chicken legs, fried pumpkin, fried eggplant, mashed potatoes, green peas, boiled cabbage, corn, spinach with cheese, caramel fudge, pecans, ice cream, and a pot of sweet tea. Before his execution, Jason spoke to the victims' families, expressing his remorse for his actions. The case of David Nixon. David Nixon was a friendly, ambitious, and optimistic man living in Grapevine, Texas. He had a talent for selling and was involved in trade. David married Donna Lella in 1990. The following year, they welcomed their son. He then ventured into real estate, which proved to be a successful field for him. Over time, he became one of the top agents in the city, handling million-dollar transactions. David's marriage ended in 1995 when he began an affair with flight attendant Lisa Hill. After the divorce, he stayed on friendly terms with his first wife, mainly because of their shared son, Nicholas. David then married another woman, but that marriage lasted only 2 years. He didn't remain single for long. Before his divorce from Lisa was finalized, he met a 27-year-old woman who initially overlooked his advances. Eventually, they decided to move into David's house together, which could signify his third marriage. David was known to his relatives for his love of fine and luxurious things, often owning more than his income could afford. 11-year-old Nicholas admired his father, believing David to be a wonderful man who was always willing to help the family. David was at the peak of his life when he suddenly became the victim of a horrific massacre. On the evening of April 18, 2002, a passing motorist discovered a fire and reported it to the fire department. After extinguishing the fire, the firefighters discovered a human body. They quickly called the police. In the middle of the night, a police investigator arrived at the scene of a fire at David Nixon's home in Grand Prairie, Texas. David had recently moved to the area. As the officer stepped out of his car onto the front driveway, he was hit by the horrible smell of burning flesh. He found a body wrapped in a partially burned sheet. Further investigation revealed it was an electric blanket, along with a sturdy camping tarp and rope that held everything together. When police examined the body, they found it was too charred to tell whether it was a man or a woman. However, they were able to determine that the deceased had fair skin based on the remaining facial features. It took several hours to carefully remove the body from the scene of the fire. During their investigation, they discovered several fibrous materials that could have been used to start the fire. These materials were later identified as electric blankets. Unfortunately, they did not find any other significant evidence to identify the suspect. A forensic expert analyzed the case and concluded that the victim was a man in his 40s who was murdered by a single gunshot to the heart before a fire broke out. There were no signs of a struggle, suggesting that the victim was caught off guard, possibly while sleeping. The initial autopsy could not identify the victim, but police believed he was the homeowner. To confirm his identity, they needed dental records and documents, which ultimately revealed that he was David Nixon, a 40-year-old. The event was a devastating loss for the deceased's family, especially for his son Nicholas. On that day, Nicholas was supposed to call his father but couldn't reach him. The Nicholas sensed that something was wrong but had no idea that his father was already dead. From the beginning, police suspected that Tracy, David's third wife, might be the killer. Friends of the couple noted that while they generally got along, they also had serious arguments, often over finances and David's gambling debts. As Tracy's tumultuous relationship with David progressed, she discovered that he was wasting money on gambling. Their arguments became more heated in the early spring of 2002. After nearly 4 years together, they decided to separate. However, a serious tax lawsuit ensued. To protect his assets and avoid losing his home, David transferred ownership of the house to Tracy. When it came time to discuss separation, Tracy insisted on keeping David's luxurious home, which had a hidden terrace and a heated pool. David tried to negotiate with her to get his property back, but she refused to agree. In April, things escalated when David reported to the police that Tracy had changed the locks on his house without his permission. She took advantage of his absence while he was away for a work-related trip to a nearby city. That evening, the police intervened to help resolve the situation. She argued that she had invested her own money in renovating the house and wanted to keep it. However, she could not provide evidence of her financial investment, and they were unable to reach an agreement. Nearly 2 weeks later, David was found murdered. This raised suspicions, especially since he had no known conflicts with anyone else, making it plausible that Tracy may have been involved in his death to retain ownership of the house. That evening, upon hearing about David's ex-husband's death, Donna went to the police station. Donna reported that David had recently expressed concerns for his safety due to Tracy's erratic behavior. She also provided the police with David's will, which he had asked her to share, naming a potential culprit if anything ever happened to him. Despite this, David had never reported any domestic violence incidents to the police and often minimized his problems. Donna understood the risks David faced during their property division, as he consistently sought to resolve conflicts peacefully. However, it seemed that Tracy was provoking new conflicts. Donna called the police to her ex-husband's home when her son could not reach his father. Donna had previously contacted Tracy to find out what might have happened, but Tracy dismissed her concerns. Tracy said she had not been keeping tabs on David, whom she had broken up with, and suggested he might be drinking or gambling. The couple had been living together in a house in Grapevine that was the subject of a dispute. They had recently agreed that the man would be moving out to a new place in Grand Prairie just a few days before his death. Tracy later confessed that they had talked about the move, and David had asked her to rent a van to help with transporting their belongings. She did not leave him in a tough spot. Instead, she called a car service and rented a special cart to load items into the van. David packed his things and went to the new address, planning to return for the rest of his belongings. However, he never came back. The disagreements that occurred created a strong motive for the crime. From the beginning, the police were interested in Tracy. They considered her a prime suspect in the case. When the police informed Tracy of the news that David had been murdered, the police expected her to be distraught and in need of comfort after the loss of a loved one. However, her reaction was unexpected. She was indifferent, uncaring, and showed no signs of distress. From that moment on, the police began to confirm their suspicions. Tracy revealed that she and David had had a serious disagreement in the months before David's death. With tears in her eyes, she shared that just before these events, she had lost her child, which made the situation worse. Last fall, Tracy discovered she was pregnant, which coincided with the decline of their relationship. In addition, she was dealing with health issues that contributed to her emotional struggles. Realizing that it was not the right time to have a child, she chose to terminate the pregnancy. Despite her decision, she still held David responsible for the loss of the child. It's important to that police found no evidence of Tracy's pregnancy, as there was no documentation to support her claims. Everything was based solely on her statements. During the first interrogation, police closely observed the Tracy, and afterward, every officer was convinced that she was not telling the truth. They noted that she gave evasive answers, appeared confused in her testimony, and her body language often suggested she was lying. The woman insisted that she was not involved in the murder and was unaware of the details surrounding it. Since Tracy refused to admit anything, The police had no evidence to confront her with. Tracy was later released from custody. Extensive searches were conducted at the scene of the massacre and in the sewer. However, much of the evidence was washed away by the fire department's efforts to extinguish the fire. Key clues included tire tracks that matched the tire tracks of the truck Tracy had rented for David's move. Small fibers of fabric similar to those used to wrap the body were also found in the sewer. It appeared that the killer had attempted to dump the body in the sewer but was unsuccessful. Although most witnesses described Tracy in a negative light, this information was not enough to make an arrest or charge. Police began reviewing surveillance camera footage near David's home. That same day, they captured footage of a young woman who closely resembled Tracy near a store not far from the residence. Although the footage was limited, it helped police reconstruct the events. After reviewing dozens of hours of video, they identified a distinctive yellow truck that had stopped near the murder scene. The tire tracks from the truck matched those found at the crime scene. They then followed the truck to a nearby driveway. Additionally, 3 days after David's murder, they spotted a white Lexus, similar to Tracy's, driving in the area. The same woman was recorded walking past the store entrance. She made a purchase and left, and store employees reported that she had purchased a large amount of cleaning products, which raised suspicion. Police recognized Tracy and began communicating with her more frequently. Despite this, she maintained that she had nothing to do with the murder and claimed that the recordings the police found were fabricated to frame her and speed up the case. Tracy gave an alibi, saying she was at her parents' house in Arlington during the time. However, police were unable to find any witnesses to confirm her whereabouts because her relatives were away. Needing more evidence to prosecute, police searched Tracy's home. They believed Tracy killed David while he was sleeping by shooting him in the heart. Forensic experts believe David may not have had time to react while he was asleep. After David's death, Tracy immediately purchased a new mattress. A shopping list from a hardware store indicated that Tracy may have been involved in the events surrounding David's death. Donna believed that the only motive for the murder was the house itself. Tracy argued that David's death would not have benefited her financially and that she deserved to inherit his house. She claimed that there was no insurance policy in David's name that would have made her the beneficiary. Since they were not legally married, she could not claim any other assets. The motive for the crime is believed to have been both money and revenge for the breakdown of her relationship. After the murder, Tracy is said to have used a yellow styrofoam truck to transport David's body. It is suspected that she planned this from the beginning to divert the investigation. Using the truck, she moved the body by loading it onto a trolley secured with straps. Tracy then took the body to the construction site of a new home. Evidence, including fabric fibers, suggests that she attempted to dispose of David's body by throwing it into the sewer at the construction site, but was unsuccessful. She left the body on the ground and returned 2 days later to carry out her plan. During this time, she was recorded on surveillance cameras several times. She then planned to dispose of the body by cremation. Tracy wanted David to be completely burned, so she wrapped his body in several layers of electric blankets. Unfortunately for her, a passerby discovered the fire and alerted the fire department. Had her plan succeeded and gone undetected, she could have disposed of the body by throwing it into a storm drain. However, fate intervened and she was unable to carry out her plan. The next day, after returning to the police station a second time, Tracy was arrested and charged with the murder of David Nixon. During a preliminary hearing, the judge granted her bail but required her to wear an electronic monitoring device until the murder trial began. Despite her guilt, Tracy had many supporters, including Roland Taylor. Roland, a local dentist and neighbor of the couple, was originally from the United Kingdom but had settled in Texas. He and Tracy had been friends for a long time. Although he had heard many accusations against her, He was convinced that Tracy was the opposite of what people claimed. He believed that David's gambling debts had created many enemies who might want to harm him. He had spent a large amount of money at the casino, which suggested that police should consider other suspects with stronger motives. After investigation, it was discovered that David had no debts. Although he occasionally borrowed money and lost money at the casino, he always paid back the money to his creditors. This made that theory absurd. Roland and Tracy then had a romantic relationship after she was released on bail, which led to their engagement. He was determined to fight for justice and freedom for the woman he loved. He helped her find a competent lawyer. And in 2005, Tracy hired a criminal defense attorney who, although experienced, had only handled 3 murder cases. However, he believed that the evidence against Tracy was completely circumstantial and believed that he could successfully secure her acquittal. The defense argued that she had been arrested within the first 36 hours of the investigation, too early to thoroughly consider all potential suspects and properly assess her possible involvement. Typically, an arrest would occur when there is clear evidence, such as a criminal caught in the act with a weapon. However, this was not her case. Investigations generally take longer to effectively identify and narrow down suspects. The defense viewed the police actions as an attempt to quickly close the case by blaming the first person they encountered. Additionally, he argued that the prosecutor's office lacked direct evidence linking her to the murder, as no DNA or fingerprints of Tracy were found in the house or truck, nor was the alleged murder weapon, a gun, discovered. The prosecution relied on the testimony of several individuals who believed Tracy was guilty from the start due to her conflict with David. Their relationship was tumultuous. Shortly before his death, David had filed a restraining order against Tracy and stopped contacting her, even though they lived in the same home. Family members noted that David had tried to distance himself from his ex-wife. The attorney learned that the police had video footage of Tracy's interrogation and requested a copy. After reviewing the material, the defense attorney became convinced that the police used deceptive tactics to pressure Tracy into providing answers. The defense argued that the Supreme Court had intentionally portrayed Tracy in a negative light from the start. One of the prosecution's key pieces of evidence was video footage of Tracy abandoning her white Lexus, moving into a rental truck, and purchasing cleaning supplies at a store near where the body was discovered. By contacting the store clerk and obtaining a receipt from the woman in the video, it was discovered that she had used a discount card. The card was registered to Tracy, saving her 19 cents on her purchase. Tracy claimed that she did not remember having the card and insisted that she would not have left such evidence behind if she were trying to move around the city undetected. Tracy believed that she had been set up. Police believed that the cleaning products found during the search of the house matched those from a local hardware store. The defense attorney has offered several theories to explain David Nixon's death. One theory is that he may have been the victim of a robbery, while another suggests that the attack may have been a targeted attack on a gambling broker over debt. The defense has also pointed to other potential suspects who seem more likely than Tracy. One of these suspects is Jerry, a longtime friend of David's. They had vacationed together at a lake house, and Jerry frequently visited their home, where he knew Tracy well. The woman suggested that Jerry may have borrowed money from David, which could have been a motive for the murder. The police decided to investigate Jerry, who quickly admitted that he understood Tracy's attempt to blame him. He was an easy target because he was a close friend of David's. Although he occasionally borrowed money from David, he denied any involvement in the case. According to Jerry, he sold his old car 2 months before the tragedy because he needed money. He asked David for a large sum of money, and David agreed to help him. However, after Christmas, Jerry paid David back all of the money. Jerry did mention that he and David had planned to have a drink that day. The last time he heard David's voice was early in the morning of the day David was murdered. On the morning of David's murder, Jerry and David spoke on the phone and made plans to meet. However, David never showed up and stopped answering his phone. It was only later that Jerry discovered what really happened. Jerry claimed that he had not seen David that day and that since there was no debt between them, he had no reason to commit the crime. When this lead failed, Tracy pointed to another potential suspect, David's first wife, Donna. Just 2 months before his death, David had purchased a $500,000 life insurance policy in New Mexico, naming their son as the primary beneficiary and Donna as the secondary beneficiary. Since the boy was too young at the time, Donna received the payout after David died. Tracy was not named on these policies, leading her to believe that Donna would benefit from David's death. After David's death, Donna received a small sum of about $10,000, which would help her support her son. She found it absurd to think that the money was a motive for the murder, noting that David would have paid her more in child support while he was alive. Meanwhile, Nicholas's son insisted that only Tracy could have harmed his father, as he had witnessed their violent arguments. Tracy's attorney argued that the prosecutor's office lacked solid evidence against her and that police had not thoroughly investigated other potential suspects since David's murder. Tracy and her attorney eventually went to trial, confident of their chances of winning because they had dismissed the prosecutor's allegations. However, the prosecution was convinced of Tracy's guilt, describing her as an unstable and aggressive. The motive behind the case centers on a house, which poses a serious threat because the David may contest the re-registration of the property in Tracy's name and reclaim it. The attorney repeatedly argued that the charges lacked forensic evidence. There were no witnesses and the murder weapon had not yet been found. The defense believed that the available evidence would not be sufficient to support the charges. Tracy believed that the case was a carefully orchestrated plot, asserting that she had been wrongly accused. She felt that the police had not investigated the case thoroughly. The prosecutor had important information from Nicholas, the David's son. Nicholas claimed that his father had kept the same pistol in a safe in the bedroom of the home David shared with Tracy. However, police were unable to find the weapon for ballistics testing. Nicholas believed that the Tracy had opened the safe, used the gun, and then discarded it. Tracy, on the other hand, claimed that David had never kept a pistol in the home and that she had never seen one. However, she could not explain why she had purchased a new mattress so soon after David's death. It appeared that the old mattress had blood on it and had become a crime scene. The prosecution said that the store staff recognized Tracy and confirmed that she had purchased a large quantity of cleaning products that could be used to remove blood. They advised Tracy to use hydrochloric acid, but it was not available in stores, so they suggested she order it online. She also purchased other items, all of which were later found in Tracy's home during a search. The prosecutor's office believed that the evidence allowed them to piece together the events of the case. The defense attempted to suggest that Donna could be the likely killer due to her strong motive. However, Nicholas's mother only received $10,000, which was insufficient to consider a violent act. They also tried to implicate David's second wife, Lisa, in the murder. Police conducted a thorough analysis of potential involvement by Donna and Lisa, examining cell phone records and geolocation data. Ultimately, they found no connection to the crime. Additionally, both Donna and Lisa had a positive relationship with David, which was confirmed by numerous witnesses. They also had credible alibis, and Lisa had no motive whatsoever. By the end of the trial, Tracy's confidence had plummeted. She expressed her frustration by saying, "I don't believe in justice anymore. I don't know how I'm going to feel after this." The trial lasted 2 weeks, and the jury found Tracy guilty of murdering David Nixon. They reached a verdict in less than 4 hours, resulting in her being sentenced to 40 years in prison. The victim's family was completely satisfied with the outcome, and many felt relieved. Roland Taylor stayed loyal to his fiancée. insisting on her innocence and visiting her in prison. With his support, Tracy filed an appeal, but it was ultimately denied. She will be eligible for parole in 2024 when she turns 55. The case of Amy Carnevale. Amy Carnevale was born on April 13th of this year in Beverly, Massachusetts, USA. Her father was a science teacher at a local school, and her mother worked as an investment consultant. Amy had a brother, Christopher, who was born 4 years earlier. Their family was very close-knit, supporting each other during difficult times. However, a few years after Amy's birth, tensions began to rise in the family. Eventually, her parents decided to divorce. At the time, Amy was just 6 years old, and the news was a huge shock for her. She struggled with her feelings for a while but eventually came to accept the situation. When she started school, it marked a new hopeful chapter in her life. Throughout this period, her family maintained their connection with her, which helped ease the emotional effects of her parents' separation. Amy was a beautiful and intelligent girl who became popular at school. She joined the cheerleading team and played field hockey. Friendly and sociable. Despite her busy social life, she had a deep love for nature and enjoyed spending time outdoors. Amy often combined her passion for nature with sports by playing golf with her father. Although she lived with her mother, she had a strong and positive relationship with her father. Amy dreams of becoming a hairstylist or hairdresser because she enjoys making her friends look beautiful. At this point in her life, she is preparing to enter high school, and she is a member of the school's cheerleading squad. She recently met a boy named Jamie Fuller at a friend's party. Amy was 12 years old, and Jamie was 14 at the time. It was well known that Jamie was a difficult person and often disrupted the peace at school. While he wasn't aggressive or malicious, some of his jokes crossed the line. Amy's parents disapproved of the relationship, thinking he was not good enough for her. When they first met, he was a skinny guy. But later he decided to get fit and build muscle to impress others. In pursuit of this, he chose to use steroids to accelerate his progress. Their relationship faced frequent challenges. There were times when they wouldn't speak for weeks but would eventually get back together. However, after he began using steroids, Amy and her friends noticed significant changes in his behavior. Jamie became increasingly aggressive and unpredictable. Their arguments grew more common, occurring both at school and outside of it. Jamie's treatment of Amy deteriorated, and some of his friends reported that he made hurtful comments that she did not deserve. Things got worse. At Amy's age, she didn't know what to focus on in a relationship or how to fight back against her boyfriend's controlling behavior. Jamie acted like he was in charge, trying to control every aspect of her life. Jamie began dictating who she could talk to and wanted to know where she was at all times. He even tried to create conflict between her and her closest friends and family. Jamie became increasingly controlling, telling her what to wear, how to look, and who she could be friends with. He tried to cut her off from school sports teams. Even though Amy complied with his demands, he continued to find new ways to insult and provoke her. Amy's friends often witnessed the humiliation she faced at Jamie's hands. Since 2020, several states have enacted laws classifying manipulative and controlling behavior as a crime. Research shows that this behavior often marks the beginning of a dangerous path that can lead to physical violence or even death for the victim. Unfortunately, at that time, had nothing to charge against him. Despite the fact that her friends were very worried about what was happening, Jamie's behavior became increasingly unpredictable, and problems with the law began. In the 90s, he was arrested twice for armed assault on a person. However, due to his age and lack of previous offenses, Jamie got away with it. He also convinced his girlfriend to keep quiet about these incidents. During this time, Amy did not share much about her relationship difficulties with others. She and Jamie frequently broke up and got back together, indicating that their relationship was in trouble. Jamie eventually left and Amy informed her friends of the breakup, but they reconciled soon after. Amy rarely shared her problems, partly because she was raised by her mother, who worked long hours and could not fully deal with her daughter's personal problems. Therefore, Amy kept her feelings to herself. At the same time, they were dealing with housing issues after a long period of renting. During this time, Amy stayed with various friends and lived with Diane Vigors, one of Jamie's ex-girlfriends. Despite this relationship, they became good friends. The situation was expected to improve on September 5, 1991, when Amy, her mother, and brother prepared to move into their new home. They had been renting for a long time, which had put a strain on their family finances, making this move a much-anticipated change in their lives. Amy had been living with her friend Diane before this incident. After breaking up with her manipulative boyfriend again, she was determined not to get back together with him. That day, she attended another field hockey practice and excitedly told her friends about her decision to end a toxic relationship for good. However, she mentioned that her ex-boyfriend, Jamie, kept calling her. Although she tried to ignore him, he was persistent. He wanted to see her, but she refused. He eventually asked her if she would like to cut his hair as a farewell gesture to their past relationship. After some consideration, she agreed and made plans to visit Jamie that evening, planning to return home a few hours later. Amy did not come home on time, and Diane was very worried about her. Amy was only 14 years old, so the delay made her friend increasingly worried. Diane called Amy's mother, and she could not find her daughter either. Their concerns increased when they discovered that Amy had left her purse and personal belongings behind, indicating that she did not intend to be gone for long. After waiting until morning, they decided to contact the police. After arriving at the police station, Amy's mother made plans to meet Jamie, whom Amy was supposed to meet. Jamie was cooperative from the start. He spoke to both the mother and the police and answered their questions openly. He even joined in the search efforts in the area. Despite being the prime suspect in Amy's disappearance, no evidence of her has ever been found. Searches of Jamie's home and car have turned up nothing. On August 28, 1991, an anonymous informant contacted the police station, claiming to know the location of Amy's body. This revelation caught the police's attention, and they were keen to find out the identity of this informant and the source of his information. The informant was identified as 19-year-old Michael Melita, a friend of Jamie's. When the police arrived at his home, he promptly agreed to assist with the investigation. At the police department, he confessed everything he knew about the tragic events of August 23rd. He explained that on August 22nd, the day before, Amy had planned to go to the beach with her friends. Jamie discovered her plans and grew angry. Fearing that there would be other guys at the beach party, his jealousy intensified. He felt restless and wanted to control Amy. On that same day, he met with Michael and voiced his wish to kill his ex-girlfriend. Multiple individuals were aware of Jamie's harmful intentions, yet none reported these plans to the police. They failed to warn Amy or her parents about the potential threat. On the evening of August 23rd, Amy visited her ex-boyfriend's house, thinking she was just there to get a haircut. However, she found 3 other boys there, 15-year-old Dominic Scola, 19-year-old Michael Melita, and 17-year-old Scott Ward. Just before Amy arrived, Jamie took out a large knife and showed it to the others, saying it was for his ex-girlfriend. He then placed the knife on a dresser. Jamie then suggested that the group take a walk in the nearby woods. During the walk, he and Amy went ahead while the other 3 lost sight of them. Michael confessed that he didn't completely believe Jamie's intentions to harm Amy, but no one felt brave enough to stop him because they were scared. Ultimately, Michael was the only one who ran to the location where Jamie and Amy had gone. He discovered Jamie covered in blood. Amy suffered multiple stab wounds on her chest, back, and stomach. Despite her injuries, she attempted to get up and escape, but her attacker was relentless. Michael mentioned that he didn't hear her screams until it was too late to help her. After Amy, who had her throat cut, collapsed, she continued to fight for her life. In that moment, she managed to say, "Jamie, I love you," which only enraged her attacker further. Jamie then began to stomp on her head. Afterward, Jamie, covered in blood, returned to his friends and described the events in detail while waving a bloody knife. Michael noted that everyone was afraid of becoming the next target, so they supported Jamie's actions. They all went home together, where they spent several hours drinking and talking calmly. Jamie took a shower to wash off the blood and changed his clothes. Jamie and Michael walked into the woods to where Amy's body was left. It was dark by then. They wrapped her body in trash bags and joked about the situation, showing no remorse or regret. When they reached the pond, they tied several concrete blocks together and threw the body into the water from the dock. Jamie made a sarcastic comment as he drowned Amy's body. He then took a bloody bracelet and necklace from her, wiped the blood off them, and wore them around his neck. This behavior is typical of a serial killer who keeps trophies as a reminder of his crimes. After Michael explained everything to the police, he was asked again how he could be involved in Amy's death. He clarified that he did not stab her. He only helped his friend dispose of her body because he was threatened. Michael confessed that he was afraid of Jamie. He believed that if Jamie learned about his conversation with the police, he would be killed. According to Michael, at first, the group thought the idea of murder was a terrible joke, and they only grasped the seriousness of the situation when it was too late. As the situation progressed, the three friends went along with Jamie's plans to avoid provoking him. On August 28, the informant was taken to the pond he had described. Michael pointed out the spot where the body was disposed of. Around 7:30 a.m., divers discovered Amy's body, which was in a shocking condition. It was evident that she had been murdered violently. The forensic expert identified that she was wearing the same clothes she had on the day she went missing. Analysis confirmed that she died on Friday, the evening she disappeared. Additionally, experts validated all of Michael's statements about the injuries on her body. They found about 10 stab wounds and a severe cut to her throat. The police could not find Jamie. Jamie's mother said she did not know where he was. So the police decided to interview the young people that Michael had mentioned. It turned out that they had known about the murder plan for over a year. During this time, the couple frequently broke up and got back together after Amy decided to leave Jamie. He did not want to let her go because he could not allow her to be with someone else. Therefore, in the end, he decided to kill her. As the police questioned the young men, more disturbing details about the case emerged. Just before they broke up, Amy had told her boyfriend that she was pregnant. He was upset by the news, especially since Amy had intended to keep the baby. Jamie was furious and even gave money to friends to attack Amy, hoping she would lose the baby. He wanted to avoid the responsibility of being a father, but his friends refused to help him. One of Jamie's friends recalled Jamie shouting that Amy had never agreed to terminate the pregnancy. Jamie eventually decided to take action against her. However, after an autopsy, police discovered that Amy was not pregnant at the time of her death. The rumor of her pregnancy became one of many speculations in the case. However, this does not rule out the possibility that she may have been pregnant with Jamie's child and had terminated the pregnancy. Unfortunately, her physical condition makes it impossible to verify these claims. The police began talking to Diane, who had lived with Amy before she was murdered. It turned out that Diane was Jamie's ex-girlfriend and had gone through the same problems in her relationship with Jamie as Amy had. Diane completely empathized with Amy's experience in a toxic relationship. Diane had also faced abuse and pressure from Jamie, but she had successfully escaped the situation unscathed. Unbeknownst to her, Diane had known about Jamie's plan to kill Amy shortly before Amy moved in with her. Jamie had mentioned taking Amy for a walk in the woods where he would give her flowers, then stab her and dump her body in a pond. However, Diane found this story so unbelievable that she chose not to warn anyone about the potential danger. When the Jamie Fuller was arrested, he faced charges of first-degree murder. Jamie smiled throughout the court proceedings and even made jokes about the victim, showing no signs of regret or remorse. During his interrogation, he remained calm and attempted to shift the blame to his friends for Amy's murder. However, when other people close to the victim were questioned, it came to light that Michael had boasted about helping Jamie dispose of the body after the murder. He was subsequently arrested for being an accomplice. It was obvious that the remaining two friends could have been witnesses to the massacre but never reported it to the police. They also knew about their friend's intentions, which he had openly discussed. Nearly a year after Amy's funeral, a witness named Scott Ward gave an interview to a local newspaper. He expressed disbelief over the events and felt guilty for not sounding the alarm sooner, which might have prevented the tragedy. At that time, he was already under investigation. Other teenagers suggested that Michael was not as innocent as he appeared. They claimed he encouraged the murder of the girl and hinted that his involvement in the crime could be more significant than he admitted. Ultimately, the police determined that only Michael and Jamie were responsible for the murder, while the others were not connected to the crime and were not arrested. Public outrage grew as people needed to know the truth and find ways to protect their communities from criminals who would harm schoolgirls for no reason. Locals had good reason to believe that all four teenagers were involved in the tragedy. The boys' parents, however, maintained their son's innocence and denied any involvement in the crime. However, police had evidence that Jamie had openly discussed his plans throughout the day. His friends even pressured him to act on them. This behavior showed Jamie was struggling and felt compelled to prove his strength. What motivated Amy's murder? Was it jealousy, a psychotic episode, a desire to harm his child, or provocation? Although the young man was only 16 at the time of the crime, he was tried as an adult. Jamie maintained his innocence and was released on bail of $2,500, which his mother paid. His lawyers pointed out that he had consumed alcohol, and they argued that the combination with steroids could lead to uncontrollable aggression. Therefore, the defense aimed to classify the crime as non-premeditated murder due to insanity, claiming that excessive steroid use can result in psychosis and other mental health issues. The lawyers requested a psychiatric evaluation for Jamie, which involved several assessments by independent experts. All concluded that Jamie was mentally stable and fit to stand trial. Meanwhile, the prosecutor's office argued that the attack was motivated by jealousy. They highlighted the manipulative behavior, strict control, and ongoing assaults that the Amy had endured in the months leading up to the incident. According to Michael's confession, Jamie sought revenge because Amy attended a beach party with her friends. Another friend in the group said, Jamie believed that Amy's pregnancy had to be terminated at all costs. The prosecution presented several witnesses, including Jamie's friend Ronald, who had taken carpentry classes with him. In the spring of 1991, Ronald testified in court about Amy's pregnancy. During this testimony, Jamie allegedly mentioned that the only way to get rid of the baby was to kill Amy. Dominic, who was with them that night, testified that he saw Jamie and his girlfriend go into the woods. He then heard some screaming. Dominic then noticed that Jamie had blood on her clothes and hands. Jamie even showed them the bloody knife he used in the attack. The blade was disfigured, indicating extreme violence. Dominic confirmed what Michael had said. Jamie recounted the details of the massacre he had committed. He explained that he first gagged Amy, professed his love for her, and then stabbed her in the stomach. Even then, she was still alive when he slit her throat. Amy told him that she still loved him, which made Jamie so angry that he stomped on her neck and started jumping on her head. The young witnesses claimed that Jamie was sober throughout the attack. They had only consumed alcohol after the murder. Jamie's mother had previously told police that alcohol had a negative effect on him, leading to anger and aggression. She recounted an incident where he nearly destroyed her room in a drunken fight with her. However, alcohol was not a factor in this situation. The forensic expert who testified for the prosecution explained that the stab wound was so deep that it almost went all the way through Amy's body, indicating a high level of hatred behind the murder. There were no signs of sexual violence, suggesting the attack may have been motivated by revenge or jealousy. One of the stab wounds penetrated the bone, disfiguring the knife point, and Amy had extensive bruising on her face and head injuries. Jamie, speaking to the media, claimed that he could not kill Amy because he still loved her. This claim was a lie. His televised declaration of love shocked and devastated Amy's mother, who was struggling to cope with her loss, resorting to sedatives and seeking help from a psychologist. To her, Jamie's display of love was a cruel taunt. The hearing lasted 7 days, after which the jury began deliberating its verdict. The prosecution argued that the Jamie was an extremely dangerous individual with the potential to become a serial killer and called for a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The defense, in contrast, argued that the young man had lost control due to steroid abuse. The jury deliberated for 2 days, taking about 6 hours to reach a decision. Jamie was found guilty on October 23, 1992, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In a separate decision involving Jamie's friend, Michael, who had helped destroy evidence, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison after a hearing on his involvement. The victim's mother, Amy, felt this was an unfairly light sentence for his role in the crime. In 2013, new state laws were enacted that allowed minors convicted of serious offenses to apply for parole. Under these laws, each case had to be assessed individually. As a result of this legal change, Jamie, who had spent most of his adult life in prison, was given the chance for release in 2019 when he was 40 years old. Jamie's request for parole was reviewed but has been postponed indefinitely. The family of the brutal massacre victim has repeatedly appealed to law enforcement, demanding that this brutal man not be released under any circumstances. As of now, he is still incarcerated. Amy's mother struggled to cope with her daughter's death, requiring regular visits to a psychiatrist and a significant amount of medication. In 2009, her health declined rapidly, leading to her passing at the age of 57. Her family believes that her early death was directly linked to the loss of her beloved daughter.